The lines that divide race and ethnicity are getting softer and blurrier and expanding the notion of us, not us versus them. Well, has the white population really shrunk that much? Has the Native American population really doubled? Or is this just the result of people checking different boxes than they used to check? Hey, so today we're going to talk about whites becoming the minority group in America. And I think no matter which way you feel on this issue or how you look at the data that's being interpreted, America is obviously changing pretty quickly. Today, nearly 4 out of 10 Americans see themselves as a racial group other than the designation of white. So that's 40% of America at this point is saying, no, I'm not white. And it's projected that this decade will be the first in our nation's history to witness a decline in the white population. But I think there's more to this story. The US Census Bureau's data is hinting that the nation will be even more multicultural by the end of this next census period than what they had even projected previously. By 2019, the white population had shrunk by nearly 9 percentage points to 60.1% of the population. For the first time ever, more than half of the nation's population that's under the age of 16, so basically for the first time ever, everybody who's 16 and under here in the States identified as a racial or ethnic minority. So the implications to this would be crystal clear, that the younger population's racial diversity is poised to transform the American demographic landscape. And it would lead to the first decade since 1790 when the white population did not grow. Obviously, multiple factors that people are looking at. There's who's having more kids and the rate of immigration and all of these things. But I have some questions. Before we tell you about that, I want to tell you about one of my favorite shows when I was in the 4th grade. I loved coming home from school and watching Saved by the Bell. My husband and I were talking the other day about this show, and he's like, well, you were obviously in love with AC Slater. That's Mario Lopez's character on the show. And I was like, no, I was in love with Zach Morris. It was Mark Paul Gosselaar. I don't know if you've seen the show, but Mark Paul Gosselaar, he played Zach Morris. And when I was doing research for this video, I came across something that I had no idea about. So Mark Paul Gosselaar, first of all, he's a fake blonde. They were dyeing his hair for this show. His hair is more like my color. And his mom is Indonesian. So here's the thing. For the US Census, if you don't check the box that says white alone, non-Hispanic, so basically if the box that you check isn't just, saying I'm just white, I've got nothing else going on, white, then you're going to be seen as a minority. You're not a part of the white group. Even if you check white and something else, you're going to be shifted from the white group over to this other group. So now we're seeing folks identifying as more than one race or as Hispanic whites, like that's how my husband identifies. And as that happens, it's putting more and more people from this majority white category to this minority category. Another point to this is that when we have more interracial or interethnic couples having kids, there's going to be an uptick in people who are now identifying as 2 or more races. Those kids are, not going to be in just that one white box. And over the next couple decades, it's going to be harder and harder to pin folks down to just a single racial identity. And frankly, it's really not super helpful to keep on trying to do that. I think we really need to get past this idea of oversimplifying our growing diversity in this country. And I don't think it's fair to the millions of people who see themselves as white and something else, or black and something else, or any other combination, to have to choose one single part of their ancestry to represent on that form. There's been a lot of fear mongering and stuff, this idea of like the decline of the whites, like there's a decline. And I want to push back on this idea. Not to address people's concerns over it, but I actually want to address the probability that this is even true. So obviously, the American identity is shifting and it's changing as it always does. Every time a new ingredient gets thrown into the pot and people start intermarrying, and it just becomes part of the new American story. But I want to raise the question of these DNA tests. What are people doing who take a DNA test and they see they have a reasonable amount of African ancestry or a reasonable amount of Native American ancestry. I read this really interesting article that was talking about how the Native American population has doubled in the last couple of years. Now, has it really doubled? I don't think so. I think this is a result of people taking DNA tests, seeing they have some Native American heritage, and deciding to check that box off when they weren't previously doing that. Now, DNA tests, I mean, I took my first DNA test about 9 years ago, and I felt like I was an early adopter there. And since then it's become much more prevalent, and it's much more common. Well, has the white population really shrunk that much? Has the Native American population really doubled? Or is this just the result of people checking different boxes than they used to check? We really need to be careful about, I think, the narratives that we create around these conversations. If we stick with the old ways, though, of defining and measuring majority and minority groups, we risk ending up with a picture that doesn't really make sense for future generations. Okay, so what if the white population really is declining? Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that white becomes a minority group? When we say minority group, I don't think we're using like a textbook definition of like being a minority, like you're in the minority numerically. I think people are using it in a more like socio-political sense. That's interesting. Like if the white only non-Hispanic group becomes the minority group in the United States, well, what does that mean? So yes, I do think we're seeing a shift in the ethnic makeup in our country, but we are always seeing a shift in the ethnic makeup in our country. When the country first started, it was predominantly, we had British and French influence here. And obviously we had people who were indigenous to the Americas. And then more groups started coming over, and we had African slaves coming over. Then you have these immigrant groups coming over. You have Sicilians, you have Italians, you have Irish, you have Polish, you have Germans, and they're all a part of this story now. And when you mix people together, they start having kids. Whether it's by coercion, whether it's by consent, either way, you end up with a new generation of people that are reflecting all of these disparate heritages. I really don't think, though, it's going to cause the big divide that so many people are fearing, or maybe they're not fearing it, maybe they're pushing it. We talk a lot about this inherent desire, it seems, by the media and other people to post-Jim Crow era continue the segregationist mindset of these are the minority groups versus the white folks. I actually feel like this increased diversity is a positive because it's bringing us together more than it splits us apart. Because the lines that divide race and ethnicity are getting softer and blurrier, and it's leading to more unity, not less. The future, I think, of the United States hinges on our capacity to constantly and collectively reimagine our group identity, create a new narrative for our nation. I think the crux of the matter is not who we were, but who we are becoming, and expanding the notion of us, not us versus them. Now, this doesn't merely mean broadening the definition of citizenship. We talk a lot on this channel about the struggle to become an American citizen and what that looked like as far as white and Black. But it means expanding our empathy and our understanding, fostering deeper connections with those who share our country, but maybe not our heritage, and that's okay. This challenge to reimagine our nation in the face of these huge demographic shifts, whenever they come, I think will be the defining endeavor of this next generation. We're not just watching history, we are making it right now. Let's write it wisely.